and Proceedings, page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Order. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. 19. 20. 21. 22. 23. The votes and proceedings dated 1st March 2017. Honorable Member, do you have any difficulty?
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker, the Committee on Health yesterday had a meeting, a very important meeting relating to malaria control, and we're not captured. So I'm just entreating the table office to capture too. Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker.
The votes and proceedings as corrected is hereby adopted. Official report. Any correction? The official report of 17th March is admitted. Honorable Member.
Right, Honorable Speaker, please, I have a correction on column 1500. Paragraph 6.
Proceed.
The second line after whole district should also have inserted or, such that the whole presentation will read as follows. It should not stop there. It should be either whole municipality or whole district or whole should be taken off because Klepe Achatime is not part of whole. So it should insert or whole should be taken off. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The official report of 17 February 2017, as corrected, is hereby adopted as a true record of proceedings. Thank you. Item 4. Honorable Finance Minister. Order. Honorable members, we shall so conduct business that our distinguished visitors and the nation that is watching us will feel well served by their respectable, honorable members of parliament. There will be order. Honorable Deputy Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Vice President, the Finance Minister is working.
Order. Honorable Majority Leader, you will have the Honorable Finance Minister to assume his appropriate place and proceed with his statement.
Speaker, I think you have already called for the consideration of item numbered as 4, which is the motion. You have already done so. So with the minister responsible for finance and economic planning with us, I should think the time is due for him to move that motion. I should think, if you listen to me, I should think. Mr. Speaker, so the time is due for the motion to be moved by the Minister responsible for Finance and Economic Planning. Thank you very much.
The Right Honourable Speaker, Honourable Members of Parliament, I come in peace. On the authority of President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, I beg to move that this Honourable House approves the financial policy of the Government of Ghana for the year ending 31st December 2017. On the authority of the President, and in accordance with Article 179 of the 1992 Constitution, permit me to present to this august House the maiden budget of the President of the Republic of Ghana. This presentation is an abridged version of the 2017 budget statement, and I would like to request the Hansard Department to capture the entire budget statement and economic policy. I also submit before this august House the following reports. The 2016 Annual Report on the Petroleum Funds in accordance with Section 48 of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act 2011, Act 815 as amended. The 2016 Annual Debt Report in accordance with Section 72 of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 921, and the 2016 Energy Sector Levies Report in accordance with Section 6 of the Energy Sector Levies Act 2015, Act 899. Mr. Speaker, let me first thank you and the House for approving my nomination as Finance Minister. My profound gratitude to both sides of the aisle. Thanks for the dry run of 3.5 hours. I pray that I'll be let off sooner this time. Mr. Speaker, I also stand here humbled by the President's courage and confidence to elevate me to this very weighty and high office of Finance Minister of the Republic of Ghana. Of the Republic of Ghana.
Order.
A nation. I thank you.
Order.
I thank you. Of the Republic of Ghana. A nation with a manifest destiny for greatness, a nation with very high expectations for President Akufo-Addo's government, a nation that is 60 years old, remains a diamond in the rough, and therefore needs more than a shine. Mr. Speaker, it is this providential point in our history that have been given this grave but exciting responsibility to participate in sending Ghana beyond aid and to realize our birthright as a Black Star of Africa. I, Mr. Speaker, accept this role with all the solemnity and reverence that it deserves. Mr. Speaker, I would like to assure this House, as I also did with the Finance Committee, that I will work with members with utmost candor and respect. You are first and foremost the legislature, the representative of our people, and I have been privileged to witness the sacrifices you made in 2016 and gone through to be here. Ayuko. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I am standing in the rather large-sized shoes of a legacy of family members, such as Dr. J.B. Dankwa, in the rather large shoes of a legacy of family members, such as Dr. J.B. Dankwa, Mr. William Oforiatta, Honorable Amwakwata of CPP, Dr. Jones Oforiatta, my father, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and Honorable Atachian. I have, Mr. Speaker,
honorable members,
I have, Mr. Speaker, I have, Mr. Speaker,
a conference with leadership. I may have to suspend sitting and have a conference with leadership if we are not in the position to listen. If this continues, this is what we have to do.
I have.
Read the budget.
Cousins and daughters government.
I have, Mr. Speaker. I have, Mr. Speaker.
By our standing orders, our procedures and tradition in this honorable house, this honorable house will listen carefully. Honorable members will be seen to be making notes, and at the appropriate time, they will come out with all that they have to say. Honorable members, they will be listening at this stage. I thank you.
Thank you. I have, Mr. Speaker, been brought up because of these people to respect this House, and I also like to honor my forebears. Finally, Mr. Speaker, let me freely admit that this battle ahead is indeed the Lord's, and I humbly confess before this august House and the nation of my inability to accomplish this enormous task without the help and the leading of the Almighty. Through Jesus Christ, we can resolve these challenges and establish a righteous and just society for all. Mr. Speaker, 9 days ago, the President presented the State of the Nation address to this august House. His address, in addition to presenting the state of the economy, also broadly outlined the vision and policy direction of the government, a vision of hope, of jobs, of wealth creation, and a robust economy that supports a thriving private sector. With this budget, I present to you the policies, strategies, and actions we will undertake to deliver the President's vision. Mr. Speaker, let us acknowledge that we have inherited a challenged economy in which we all are stakeholders. considerable debt overhang and rising interest payments caused by excessive borrowing, expenditure overruns and accumulated arrears caused by excessive sole sourcing, inflated cost of projects, lax fiscal policies, and weak commitment to controls. Revenue underperformance caused by leakages, loopholes, and tax exemptions. Slowdown in economic growth caused by energy challenges and a lack of an enabling environment for the private sector. Limited capital investment, among others, due to rigidities from earmarking of revenues that severely limit the fiscal space and undermines the prioritization of all government's policies, and an urgent need to collaborate with our workforce and build a shared partnership to enhance training and improve their productivity. The country's debt stock, Mr. Speaker, has reached a level of approximately 73% of GDP as at the end of 2016, which is in excess of debt sustainability threshold of 70%. This has resulted in high debt service costs, with interest payments alone taking up nearly 42% of tax revenue. This, together with compensation of employees and statutory payments, is more than total domestic revenue, leaving no fiscal space for growth-enhancing policies, programs, and expenditures. Total expenditures at end December 2016 stood at 30.3% of GDP against a target of 26.4% of GDP, with an outstanding stock of arrears of nearly 7 billion cedis. This is at variance with the performance criteria on the non-accumulation of arrears for the 2016 fiscal year under the IMF-supported Extended Credit Facility Program. Mr. Speaker, the large fiscal slippages resulted in a fiscal deficit of 8.7% of GDP on a cash basis and a 10.3% on commitment basis. This is a sharp deviation from the IMF program fiscal target of 5.3% of GDP. We intend to reverse this trend and restore fiscal discipline. Mr. Speaker, the rate of economic growth has slowed down in recent times, with 2016 growth estimated at 3.6%, the lowest in over 2 decades. Of particular concern is the erratic performance of the agricultural sector and the continuing energy challenges, which has negatively affected the industrial sector. The effect of this is a struggling private sector and rising unemployment. Mr. Speaker, while inflation and interest rates have recently been on the decline, we still have to fix the underlying macroeconomic fundamentals to ensure that this trend is sustainable. Mr. Speaker, the economic challenges we face require deliberate but urgent, well-thought-out strategic steps and the backing and total support of the Ghanaian people. I am confident that we have the human resources, especially in this House and in our diaspora community, the experience, and most importantly, the resounding mandate of the people to guide and inspire us. This budget presents a clear roadmap on how we'll move this economy from its current state into a full-fledged middle-income economy, a Ghana beyond aid. Mr. Speaker, our goal is to build the most business-friendly and people-centered economy in Africa, which will translate into job creation and prosperity for all Ghanaians. We will strike the right balance between fiscal consolidation and growth by making credible policy choices that will create a fiscal space to implement growth-enhancing initiatives. Mr. Speaker, we intend to build a partnership with labor that will result in a social contract to mark an era of peace in which we will mutually enhance the productivity of our workforce. This commitment, however, is hampered by 5 constraints which we need to overcome: low revenue collection, expenditure overruns and corruption, high wage bills, rigidity of fiscal structure caused by heavy earmarking of tax revenue, and high debt service payments. This budget presents a proposal to address these issues permanently, and I hope I can secure the support of this august House in this regard. Revenue administration remains a challenge. To boost revenue streams, we will strengthen tax administration, reduce tax exemptions, plug revenue loopholes and leakages, and combat tax evasion, especially at our ports. We will broaden the tax base whilst reducing and abolishing some taxes and levies. The National Identification Scheme, a priority project of this administration, which we intend to relaunch this year, will support our efforts to rope in the economically active but undocumented citizens and the informal sector of the economy, thereby broadening the tax base and accelerating financial inclusion. Mr. Speaker, we will adhere to and maintain good economic governance principles of fiscal discipline, accountability, and transparency. To reiterate what the President says, we will protect the public purse by guaranteeing value for money in all public transactions and exercising prudence and discipline in our fiscal management to deliver on the aspirations of the Ghanaian people. Inefficiencies and waste in government spending will not be tolerated, and there will be strict enforcement of all relevant laws and regulations, especially the new Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 921. Government will pursue an effective debt management strategy to ensure debt sustainability. We will also adopt global standards of risk and treasury management to ensure accountability in the use of state resources. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we will work to reduce the amount of government borrowing and the resulting crowding out of the private sector. Mr. Speaker, as an example, in the 2016 budget statement, the entire allocation for the ministries of Roads and Highways, Trade and Industry, Food and Agriculture, Water Resources, Works and Housing, Youth and Sports, and Ministry of Transport amounted to a total of 2.2 billion Ghana cedis. Interest payments in 2016 alone of 10.8 billion will be nearly 5 times what was allocated to these 6 key ministries combined. This is how pernicious our debt stranglehold is. Mr. Speaker, the budget will set the pace for job creation and accelerated growth by empowering the private sector. To accomplish this, we will shift the focus of economic management from taxation to production. This will reduce the cost of doing business and create a conducive climate for the services sector, investments, and job creation. In this regard, a number of taxes that impede growth will be reviewed and, if necessary, abolished. Government will reverse the recent low growth trend by boosting agriculture and industrial productivity. Mr. Speaker, the 2017 budget will set in motion the following key policy priorities and flagship projects. Establishment of the Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Project, IPEP. Under this project, every constituency will be allocated the cedi equivalent of $1 million to combat poverty.
Order.
$1 million to each constituency in this House to improve, to combat poverty and improve the lives of rural dwellers and deprived communities. Implementation of the One District, One Factory program by initiating a massive industrialization campaign across the country, which will equip and empower communities to use their local resources to manufacture products that are in high demand both locally and in the sub-region. Establishment of the Zongo Development Fund to support the provision of critical infrastructure and services, rollout of the National Identification Scheme to facilitate efficient delivery of public and private services and help formalize the economy, rollout of free SHS, to ensure equal opportunity for secondary education for all, and enhancement of human capital for the country. Rollout of a national digital addressing system to provide unique addresses for all properties in Ghana, and restoration of teachers and nurses training allowances.
Order.
Mr. Speaker,
Order.
despite the previous government significantly missing the 2016 targets of the IMF, I want to assure my fellow Ghanaians, investors, and external stakeholders that we are committed to continue with the Extended Credit Facility Program with the IMF. We will, however, review some of the targets and structural reform benchmarks to accommodate our priorities of tax reliefs and other positive measures to boost the private sector. Mr. Speaker, the Akufo-Addo government seeks to sow the seeds that will bear sufficient fruit to make this and future generations prosperous. This will be done by unleashing the creative abilities of Ghanaians, facilitate increased economic activity, which will lead the improvement in people's lives. Mr. Speaker, there are exciting times ahead, and there is every good reason to be optimistic that our country is ready to work again. Ghana is ready because the people are ready, and in NPP, they have a government that is ready. Mr. Speaker, our government looks forward to a partnership of progress with our honorable colleagues across the aisle. Mr. Speaker, we must as a nation come together to confront our reality. The President did mention 9 days ago that he was in a hurry. Mr. Speaker, we must all be in a hurry. We must trigger a national sense of urgency to deal with our deficits. Its continual presence curtails our capacity to leverage our many opportunities and resources that we have as a nation. Let me stress, Mr. Speaker, we cannot borrow our way out of these challenges. This will be tantamount to creating and sharing poverty, which only leads to a loss of our fiscal sovereignty. So, like the President, we must all be in a hurry to grow our way into prosperity. This budget, Mr. Speaker, seeks to do this. Mr. Speaker, my presentation today will follow this outline. I'll present a short brief on how the global economy performed in 2016, the medium-term outlook, and the expected impact on the Ghanaian economy. This will be followed by the macroeconomic performance for 2016 against the targets set. I'll then present the President's macroeconomic targets for 2017 and the medium-term targets. In addition, I'll briefly talk about some key sector deliverables in 2017 and then provide you with the key policy initiatives for 2017. And I'll finally conclude with highlights of key messages in the budget. The global economic performance. Mr. Speaker,
Order.
the global economy is expected to witness some improvement in growth in 2017 and the medium term after a lackluster performance in 2016. The January 2017 update of the IMF World Economic Outlook projects a global growth of 3.1% in 2016. This is expected to improve marginally to 3.4% in 2017 and further to 3.6% in 2018. The downside risk to the global outlook, according to WEO, include increased restrictions on global trade and migration and its negative impact on productivity. In addition, high corporate debt, declining profitability, weak balances, and thin policy buffers in emerging market economies may lead to capital flow reversals and depreciation of the local currency. Commodity prices. Mr. Speaker, oil prices have picked up in recent weeks, resulting mainly from an agreement among major producing countries to reduce supply. Crude oil prices are expected to average $55 per barrel in 2017, about 28% increase over the 2016 levels. Gold prices are expected to decline from an average of $1,249 per fine ounce in 2016 to $2,219 in 2017, due to largely unexpected strengthening of the US dollar. According to the Commodity Markets Outlook by the World Bank, cocoa price is projected to average about $2,940 per ton in 2017. Implementation of ECOWAS Common External Tariff. Mr. Speaker, Ghana joined 9 other member states to implement the ECOWAS Common External Tariff, CET, effective February 1st, 2016. The ECOWAS CET is considered a major platform for the establishment of customs union that will facilitate free trade and advance greater economic integration within the region. The tariff is expected to help address problems such as cross-border smuggling and dumping in the sub-region. Government is currently monitoring and evaluating the impact of the new regime on various sectors of the economy. Implications of global development for Ghana's economy. Mr. Speaker, we address the risk of commodity price volatility. Government will work towards diversifying the economy. We will add significant value to our exports and support local manufacturing of imported goods, which can be produced locally in partnership with the private sector. Macroeconomic performance for 2016, growth. Mr. Speaker, growth has remained subdued over the period. The 2016 GDP, based on the provisional term for the first 3 quarters of the year, is estimated at 3.6%, with the non-oil rail GDP estimated at 4.6%, same as target. At a sectorial level, the industry sector, specifically mining and quarrying, underperformed due to a contraction in upstream petroleum output, which constitute the bulk of the mining and quarrying subsector. All the subsectors in the agriculture sector, however, recorded positive growth rates. The services sector continues to dominate the sectors with a share of 54.3% in 2016. Mr. Speaker, inflation, which remained elevated for most part of 2016, began to slow down towards the end of the year. Inflation began the year at 19%, peaked at 19.2% in March, and ended the year at 15.4%. Monetary and credit development. Mr. Speaker, the key monetary aggregates and credit to the private sector recorded slow growth in 2016 in light of tight monetary policy stance. The broad money supply, M2 plus, at the end of 2016 recorded an annual growth of 22% compared to 26.1% the same period of 2015. This was mainly driven by moderate growth of 19.5% in net domestic assets and a net foreign asset growth of 29.8% in December 2016. Growth in total outstanding credit to the public and private institutions moderated further in December 2016, a reflection of a higher incidence of non-performing loans and a tight monetary policy stance. The annual growth in total credit slowed to 17.6% at the end of December 2016 from 24.9% recorded in 2015. Stock market developments. Mr. Speaker, annual changes in the Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index remain negative, generally reflecting investor preference for higher yielding money market instruments. The GSE Composite Index lost 15.3% year-on-year in December 2016 to close at 1,689.09 points, from 1,994.91 points in December 2015. Total market capitalization stood at 52.7 billion at the end of December 2016, showing a year-on-year decline of 7.8%. Interest rates. Mr. Speaker, interest rates in 2016 exhibited mixed performance. The Bank of Ghana policy rate was kept at 26% until October 2016, as risk to inflation and growth were assessed as balanced. The policy rate, however, was reduced to 25.5% as inflation pressures eased while domestic growth conditions continued to deteriorate. Yields on short-term government securities decreased, while those of medium to long-term Government of Ghana bonds increased in line with government's policy to properly align the yield curve and extend the maturity profile. Exchange rate. Mr. Speaker, the Ghana cedi remained relatively stable against the major currencies in the currency market in 2016 on account of tighter monetary policy and improved foreign exchange inflows.
Honorable members.
However, this trend was reversed in the run-up to the December elections as December pressures mounted. The Ghana cedi recorded a cumulative depreciation of 9.6% and 5.3% against the US dollar and the euro, respectively, but appreciated by 10% against the pound sterling in the interbank market in 2016. Mr. Speaker, the balance of payment turned out surplus for the first time since 2011 due to improved current account balance. Accordingly, there was a buildup in gross foreign assets which supported the relative stability in the exchange rate. The BOP surplus was $247 million compared to a deficit of $129 million in 2015. The trade balance improved from a deficit of $3.1 billion in 2015 to a deficit of $1.7 billion in 2016 due to increased exports receipts by 7.2% and a decline in imports by 5.3%. The gross foreign assets at the end of December was estimated at $6.2 billion from $5.9 billion at the end of December 2015, representing a buildup of $277 million. This was sufficient to provide cover for 3.5 months of imports and goods, same as in December 2015. Fiscal developments. Mr. Speaker, the main objective of fiscal policy, as envisioned in the 2016 budget, was to consolidate government's finances by reducing the fiscal deficit from 6.3% of GDP in 2015 to 5% of GDP in 2016. Provisional data for 2016, however, indicates that the envisioned fiscal consolidation was not achieved. As a result, total revenue, domestic revenue and grants was 11.1% below target, an actual of 33.7 billion Ghana cedis against a target of 37.9 billion Ghana cedis. While expenditure, including outstanding expenditure claims, exceeded the target by 16.2%. These slippages resulted in a fiscal deficit on commitment basis of 10.3% of GDP. On cash basis, the fiscal deficit was 8.7% of GDP against a target of 5% of GDP. The primary balance for the period recorded a deficit of 1.4% of GDP against a targeted surplus of 1.2% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, the shortfall in total revenue and grants was broadly attributed to the impact of energy challenges on households and firms. Lower than anticipated receipts from oil due to both lower than program benchmark crude oil price and production and non-realization of proceeds from both tax and non-tax categories. In addition, tax compliance was relatively weak. Mr. Speaker, total expenditures, including outstanding obligations, amounted to 51.1 billion at the end of December 2016. Outstanding obligations of 5 billion Ghana cedis comprise MBO obligations with the Ministry of Finance currently, which had not been captured on the GIVMIS, as well as outstanding payments to statutory funds. These outstanding obligations relate mostly to compensation of employees, goods and services, and domestically financed capital expenditure. Petroleum receipts in 2016. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, GMPC lifted 6 parcels of crude oil consisting of the 31st to 35th Jubilee and first 10 liftings on behalf of the state and exported a total of 21,580 million scaps of gas to Ghana National Gas Company. Total group lifted was 5,856,921 barrels of oil. Receipts from crude oil liftings for 2016 included revenues from the sale of 4.8 million barrels of oil from the 30th lifted in December 2015 and the 34th Jubilee lifting, which amounted to $207.79 million US. The proceeds from the 35th Jubilee and first 10 liftings in December 2016 were received in the first quarter of 2017. Mr. Speaker, actual petroleum receipt for 2016 fell short of the 2015 performance by 29.1% due to the continuous decline in crude oil prices, the decline in Jubilee production, and lower TEN production. Mr. Speaker, total public debt stock as end 2016 stood at almost 73% of GDP, up from 72% in 2015. This was due to the larger than expected fiscal deficit and financing requirement in 2016. Domestic and external debt stood at 31.7% of GDP and 40.8% respectively. In nominal terms, the public debt stock as at end 2016 stood at 122.3 billion Ghana cedis, with domestic and external debt of 53.4 billion and 68.9 billion Ghana cedis respectively. Energy levies. Mr. Speaker, the Energy Sector Levies Act 2015, Act 899, was enacted, quote, to consolidate existing energy sector levies to ensure efficient utilization of proceeds generated from the levies, impose a price stabilization and recoveries levy to facilitate sustainable long-term investment in the energy sector, and to provide for other related matters. Mr. Speaker, the law requires the utilization of the energy sector levies mainly for the clearance of legacy debts of SOEs operating in the energy sector to support power generation and power sector infrastructure, subsidy for premixed fuel, and the stabilization of petroleum price. A total amount of 3.2 billion was programmed to be collected as total energy sector levies for the year 2016. Actual collection at the end of the year was 3.3 billion Ghana cedis. A breakdown of the utilization of the levies is provided in this budget statement. Mr. Speaker, a few challenges have been encountered in the utilization of the proceeds, and we'll have to come to this August House for amendment of the Act.
Order, honorable members.
Mr. Speaker, government's policy objective for the medium term, among others, will be to build the most business-friendly and industrialized economy in Africa, capable of creating decent jobs and prosperity for all Ghanaians, modernize agriculture, improve production efficiency, achieve food security and profitability of our farmers with special emphasis on value addition, develop leadership skills, quality education, entrepreneurship, job skills, and creative skills, and ensure a functioning social protection system which addresses the needs of the weak, marginalized, vulnerable, and socially excluded, a preferential option for the poor, among others. Mr. Speaker, to achieve our broad macroeconomic objectives, our policy direction will be to restore and sustain macroeconomic stability, to shift the focus of economic management from taxation to production, to manage the economy competently and with integrity, and make the machinery of government work to deliver the benefits of progress for all Ghanaians. Mr. Speaker, prudent monetary and external sector policies will also be pursued by the Bank of Ghana to complement the fiscal policy stance to ensure price and exchange rate stability. Mr. Speaker, we are confident that the above highlighted policies, which are discussed in detail in the budget statement, will contribute to the achievement of the following macroeconomic targets for 2017. Overall real GDP growth of 6.3%. Non-oil real GDP growth of 4.6%. End-year inflation of 11.2%. Average inflation of 12.4%. Overall fiscal deficit of 6.5% of GDP. Primary surplus of 0.4% of GDP. And gross foreign assets to cover at least 3.5 months of imports of goods and services. Mr. Speaker, we believe that our medium-term policies anchored in fiscal discipline, a broadened tax base, elimination of wasteful expenditure, prudent debt management strategies, complementary monetary policy, and sustainable external balance will ensure even better microeconomic outcomes in the medium term. In our mid-year review, we'll further outline some new means to broaden the tax base. Macroeconomic targets for the medium term 2017 to 2019 include the following. Overall real GDP growth to average 7.4%. Non-oil real GDP growth to average 5.6%. Inflation to be within the band of 8 plus or minus 2% in the 2018-2019 period. Overall fiscal deficit to reduce to 3% by end of 2019. Current market deficit projected to decline to 4.8% of GDP in 2018 and further to 2.7% of GDP in 2019. And gross foreign assets to cover not less than 3.5 months of imports of goods and services in the medium term. Mr. Speaker, consistent with section.
Order. Honorable members, order. The debate will ensue later.
Consistent with Section 16 of the PFM Act 2016, Act 921, we have also set the following targets on primary and secondary fiscal indicators to monitor the fiscal health of the economy towards the achievement of our fiscal policy objectives in 2017. Non-oil primary deficit of 0.8% of GDP, public debt stock equivalent towards trend of 70.9% of GDP, capital spending of 12.6% of total expenditures, and domestic revenues to GDP ratio of 21.4%. Resource mobilization for 2017. Mr. Speaker, total revenue and grants, including program receipts from petroleum for 2017 fiscal year, is estimated at 44.9 billion Ghana cedis, indicating a 33.5% increase over the provisional outturn in 2016. Total non-petroleum revenue and grants is estimated at 42.6 billion, representing a 29.2% increase over the provisional outturn in 2016. Mr. Speaker, total receipts from petroleum is estimated at 1.2% of GDP and amounts to 2.4 billion, representing 231.2% increase over the outturn in 2016. Domestic revenue is estimated at 43.4 billion, or 21.4% of GDP, and is expected to be 33.5% higher than the provisional outturn in 2016. Mr. Speaker, total tax revenue is estimated at $34.4 billion, representing 6.9% of GDP. Of this amount, non-petroleum tax revenue is estimated to grow by 32.4%, and this amounts to $33.8 billion, equivalent to 16.9% of non-oil GDP. Taxes on income and property is estimated to increase by 47.7% to $13.4 billion in 2017, accounting for 39.1% of total tax revenue. Of this amount, royalties from petroleum is estimated at 616.8 million Ghana cedis. Taxes on goods and services are estimated at 13.9 billion Ghana cedis, representing a 13.3% increase over the provisional outturn in 2016 and 40.3% of the estimated total tax revenue for 2017. International trade taxes are estimated at 7.1 billion, representing 3.5% of GDP and 20.6% of total tax revenue. This estimate represents a 61.1% increase over the provisional outturn for 2016. Mr. Speaker, the significant growth of this tax type emanates mainly from additional 1 billion Ghana cedis in tax measures that will be realized as savings from the reduction in the amount of import exemptions that will be granted in 2017 fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, non-tax revenue is estimated at 6.7 billion Ghana cedis, representing 15.3% of domestic revenue. An amount of 3.4 billion is expected to be retained by MDAs for the funding of the activities, and the rest lodged in the consolidated fund. Of the total amount estimated for non-tax revenue, an amount of 1.7 billion is estimated as non-tax petroleum revenue. Mr. Speaker, grants from development partners is estimated at 1.5 billion, equivalent to 0.8% of GDP. Resource allocation for 2017. Mr. Speaker, total expenditure, including provision made for the clearance of arrears and outstanding commitments in 2017, is estimated at 58.1 billion, equivalent to 28.6% of GDP. The estimated expenditure for the year represents a 13.7% increase over the provisional outturn for 2016. Of this amount, 3.7 billion Ghana cedis, equivalent to 1.8% of GDP and 6.4% of total expenditure, will be used for the clearance of arrears and outstanding commitments. Mr. Speaker, provision has been made for the clearance of up to 20% of the outstanding claims from previous years, whilst we await the outcome of a special forensic audit of these outstanding claims. Mr. Speaker, compensation of employees is estimated at 16 billion Ghana cedis. Of this amount, 14 billion equivalent to 6.9% of GDP. Expenditure on goods and services is estimated at 3.5 billion, representing 1.7% of GDP. Total interest payments estimated at 13.9 billion, represents 23.9% of total expenditure and is equivalent to 6.9% of GDP. Of this amount, domestic interest payment constitutes 80.5% of the total interest payments and amounts to 11.2 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, the existing legislation that have underpinned the estimation of grants to other governments units over the years is being reviewed to break the cycle of rigidities in the budget. Consequently, grants to other government units comprising statutory payments into the National Health Insurance Fund, Ghana Education Trust Fund, the District Assembly's Common Fund, Road Fund, Energy Fund, transfer to Ghana National Petroleum Company, retention of internally generated funds by MDAs, and other earmark funds, has been constrained to a ceiling of 25% of all our tax revenues. The total allocation for grants to other government units is 9.7 billion. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the significant tax incentive granted in this year's budget, an amount of 241 million has been budgeted in social benefits to assist lifeline consumers of electricity and transfers for social protection. A total amount of 7.1 billion has been allocated for capital expenditure. Of this amount, 38.9% will be financed from domestic sources and the remaining from foreign sources. Mr. Speaker, based on the revenue expenditure estimates, the 2017 budget will result in an overall budget deficit of Ghana cedis 13.2 billion, equivalent to 6.5% of GDP. Financing of the deficit will be from both domestic and foreign sources.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker,
Order.
Net domestic financing is estimated at 14.6 billion, equivalent to 7.1% of GDP, and includes financing from divestiture receipts of 1.8 billion. Net foreign financing is estimated to constitute a net repayment of 1.3 billion, equivalent of 0.6% of GDP. An amount of 300.7 million Ghana cedis is estimated to be saved in the Ghana Petroleum Contingency Funds, while the sinking fund is expected to be drawn down by 716.1 million. Projection of 2017 petroleum receipts and allocation. Mr. Speaker, the estimated benchmark revenue price for crude oil is $56.142 per barrel for 2017, with a benchmark output of 43,875,920 barrels, which is 120,208 barrels per day, and 32.5 million scf for oil and gas, respectively. The petroleum revenue for 2017 is estimated at $515 million, with BR projected at $242 million. Mr. Speaker, the second three-year cycle for the review of the petroleum revenue distribution formula, as stipulated in the PRMA, has elapsed. We would like to request this August House to maintain the existing distribution formula as follows: 30% of the net carried and participating interest to GMPC, 70% of net receipts after GMPCs to the APFA, 30% of net receipts after GMPC to the Ghana Petroleum Funds, 30% of the amount allocated to the Ghana Petroleum Funds to the Ghana Heritage Fund, and 70% of the amount allocated to the Ghana Petroleum Funds to the Ghana Stabilization Fund. We would also like the House to approve the following priority areas for the spending of the APFA for 2017 to 2019 in line with the PRMA: agriculture, fiscal infrastructure and service delivery in education, fiscal infrastructure and service delivery in health, and road and rail infrastructure development. The medium-term debt strategy and debt sustainability analysis. Mr. Speaker, the debt strategy for the medium term will be to manage the public debt at the lowest cost and at prudent levels of risk to bring our debt to GDP ratio to 65% over the medium term. Consequently, in accordance with the requirement of the PFMA, my ministry will conduct and publish a debt sustainability analysis and update the MTDS to guide the borrowing plan and operations. The reports will inform policy decisions leading to the reduction in the debt burden and insulation against other fiscal vulnerabilities. Sectorial performance and outlook. Mr. Speaker, the sectorial policies are designed to achieve our broad objectives of jobs and wealth creation and macroeconomic stability while ensuring compliance with the PFM Act. Permit me to update this August House on the performance of some key sectors of the economy and the outlook for 2017 and the medium term. I will begin with this August House, the Parliament of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, Parliament continued to discharge its mandate through the consolidation of 181 papers, including 25 bills, 4 legislative instruments, 8 constitutional instruments, 19 loan agreements, and 39 committee reports. Out of the 25 bills laid, 18 were passed into law. Parliament also facilitated the establishment of the Scrutiny Office to provide expert analysis of policy measures on bills. The budget, loan agreements, and international financial transactions brought before this House for approval. In 2017, the office will be strengthened to undertake pre-legislative scrutiny of bills through research and information pursuant to the PFM Act. Mr. Speaker, Parliament will complete the review of its standing orders to open up committee meetings to the public and empower committees to undertake independent investigations and summon witnesses and government officials to appear before it. The Parliamentary Training Institute, established in 2016, will be strengthened to undertake and promote research in parliamentary democracy. A strategic plan for the takeover of the Institute will be developed in 2017. Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, the government recognizes agriculture as the main anchor of the country's economy. Unfortunately, we have witnessed a steady decline in the sector, and production levels have fallen consistently over the years. In the medium term, we intend to modernize the sector to improve productivity and achieve food security and profitability for our farmers. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, government will launch the Planting for Food and Jobs campaign. The campaign is designed to encourage all citizens, both urban and rural, to take up farming as a full part-time activity. It is intended to structure it along the lines of the SYL Operation Feed Yourself program in the 1970s. The campaign will involve the production of maize, rice, soybean, sorghum, and vegetables. Other crops will be adopted in subsequent years. The campaign will be anchored on 5 pillars, namely provision of improved seeds, supply of fertilizers, provision of dedicated extension services, marketing, and e-agriculture and monitoring. This initiative, Mr. Speaker, is expected to increase the production of maize by 30% from the current production levels, rice by 49%, soybean by 25%, and sorghum by 28%. This will create 750,000 jobs in both direct and indirect employment. The ministry will import improved seeds to augment any shortfall for the Planting for Food and Jobs campaign. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, the ministry will continue the fertilizer subsidy program to help increase the productivity of our farmers. To this effect, we intend to distribute nationwide an expected 180,000 metric tons of subsidized fertilizer. Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, the fisheries subsector employs a significant number of our people, especially along the coastal areas. Over the past years, efforts have been made to also boost both marine and inland fishing and support agriculture development. However, we believe we need to modernize the artisanal fishing methods to ensure sustainable fishing and also improve production levels. To modernize and transform the industry, the ministry will complete phase 1 of the Anumabo Fisheries College to enhance research and knowledge base in fisheries technology for all operators. It will also collaborate with relevant institutions and the private sector to develop modern landing sites and storage facilities at Jamestown, Cape Coast, Axim, and Mumford. Trade and industry. Mr. Speaker, the country's industrial sector faces significant challenges, the principal ones of which are lack of access to finance, high interest rates, inadequate and poor quality raw materials for industrial processing, poorly developed domestic trade, and an unreliable and expensive power source. The goal of government over the medium term is to address these challenges in ways that enable industry to thrive and become a major source of jobs, especially for our youth. A number of major policy interventions will be initiated this year as part of the strategy. In 2017, the ministry will roll out its district-level component of the National Export Strategy to develop one export commodity in every district. In 2017, the Ghana Commodities Exchange Project will establish a state-of-the-art, transparent, and professional market institution to create an orderly, transparent, and ready market for goods that are produced by farmers in the country. Tourism, culture, and creative arts. Mr. Speaker, tourism, culture, and creative art remains one of the most underdeveloped sectors in our economy, despite the immense growth potential and opportunities for job creation. When developed, the sector can positively impact the lives of many individuals, families, communities, and small enterprises in our country, providing needed jobs for our teeming youth. Our objective is to transform the country into a major meeting, incentive, conference, and exhibition center. To facilitate this, we will aggressively develop our tourist sites to bring them to world-class standards. In 2017, the government will kickstart the Marine Drive Tourism Investment Project, covering the over 240 acres of land from Osu Christianborg Castle to the Arts Center. This project will transform the beach area into a tourism enclave to create jobs for our youth. The ministry will partner the private sector to develop the Efua Sutherland Park into an ultra-modern world-class park. Especially for 2017, Mr. Speaker, we will use IT to promote and market tourism via the single portal window. Mr. Speaker, the ministry will also undertake a food festival to showcase the diverse, rich Ghanaian foods through cooking and competition throughout the country. Mr. Speaker, this government intends to ensure that Ghanaians enjoy reliable, efficient, and affordable power to provide comfort in their homes and support the development and growth of their businesses. In 2016, significant efforts were made to address some of the challenges in the sector. This include an increase in the total installed generation capacity by 880 megawatts. In 2017, government will continue to increase the installed generation capacity of the country to meet the growing demand for electricity. A total of 1,227 megawatts of installed capacity is scheduled to be added. 370 megawatts for AXA project, 107 megawatts for GPGC project, 350 megawatts for Sen Power project, and 400 megawatt early power project, among others. Mr. Speaker, ECG and NEDCO will continue with systems to upgrade projects to improve the quality of power supply to customers.
Order.
Furthermore, steps will be taken to ensure that outstanding issues surrounding the implementation of the Ghana Compact 2 are addressed to allow for its implementation in order to achieve the desired objective. Mr. Speaker, with regards to oil and gas, government will work with the Jubilee partners to address the shortfall in oil and gas production resulting from the 2016 damage of the turret bearing on FPSO Kwame Nkrumah, and would adopt a three-phase approach to convert the FPSO Kwame Nkrumah to a permanently spread mode. First gas from the 10 field to the gas processing plant is expected in the first half of 2017. GMPC is engaging with the partners to develop an integrated technical and commercial schedule that will target gas startup in the second quarter of 2018. Railway development. Mr. Speaker, this government believes that rail will be a major catalyst to drive the growth that we envisage in the coming years. Rail transportation provides safer, cheaper, and faster way of moving goods and people to facilitate trade and support economic activity. Our vision is to open up the country and provide new opportunities to our people to do business and trade among themselves. In that regard, government will complete the second D to Takoradi via Kojokrom section and continue the section from Kojokrom to Takwa through in Suta. This will help improve the operational performance and revenue of Ghana Railway Company Limited and enable the company wean itself from government support. In addition, it will enhance the performance and competitiveness of the manganese mine located on the corridor. Work will commence on the Western Line, which starts from Takoradi and terminates at Kumasi, having two branch lines, namely Dunkwa to Awoso and Kojokrom to Second D, covering a distance of some 340 kilometers. The corridor, when completed, will facilitate the haulage of manganese, bauxite, cocoa, and other bulk commodities. The feasibility studies and front-ending engineering design have already been done on the line. We will also initiate discussions to secure funding for other major projects such as the Central Spine, which stretches from Kumasi to Paga, covering a distance of 700 kilometers. The corridor is a greenfield and will be developed in sections. The sections are Kumasi to Buepe and Buepe to Paga. A pre-feasibility study was undertaken on the line, and in 2017, we plan to undertake full feasibility studies to enable the ministry to invite developers and source funding for the development. The Eastern Railway Line will cover a distance of 330 kilometers and starts from Accra to Kumasi with a branch line from Achimota to Tema. When the line becomes operational, it will decongest the port and facilitate the movement of cargo and passengers to Kumasi and its environs. The Central Railway Line will cover a distance of 200 kilometers and spans from Kutuku on the Eastern Line to Huni Valley on the Western Line. It will have a branch line from Achiasi to Kede, and we plan to undertake feasibility studies on the line and extend it to Chibi. Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker. Housing.
Order.
Housing.
Order.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, housing. Government recognizes that the dream for all Ghanaians
Order.
is to own a home or at least have decent rental accommodation. There are, however, major constraints to this dream. These include the high cost of buying and renting a home, undersupply of annual requirement of housing units, lack of long-term financing for real estate development, and lack of appropriate financing arrangements. To reduce the housing deficits, government will use appropriate mix of public policy and public-private investment to deliver quality, affordable housing solutions that meets the needs and financial capacity of ordinary Ghanaians. Water and sanitation. Mr. Speaker, major water projects to be undertaken in 2017 would include the continuation of the Greater Accra Metropolitan Area water extension projects, as well as those of Kumasi and Kepos, the Pong at Kimoda and Ho water expansion projects, Tono water treatment project for the Upper East region of Rongo, as well as those of the Yendi and Damango will be undertaken, while the WA project will be completed. Preparatory work for the Sunyani and Techiman, as well as the second Takoradi water supply projects will be finalized. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we'll complete the ongoing 1,000 borehole projects and also initiate the construction of at least 2,000 boreholes across the country as part of the drive to get us closer to the desired goal of water for all. In 2017, the ministry will pursue a comprehensive sludge management program targeted at constructing 2 sludge treatment plants in Sekondi, Takoradi, and Tamale metropolitan areas with the objective of streamlining the disposal of fecal matter into water bodies and drains. The ministry will also provide appropriate uniform and identification for 4,500 environmental health officers nationwide to ensure visibility and enforcement of environmental sanitation and basic hygiene bylaws. Roads and highways. The ministry maintained its focus on routine and periodic maintenance activities to protect the huge investment made by government in the provision of the road infrastructure. In 2016, routine maintenance activities were undertaken on 10,723 kilometers of road of the trunk road network, 16,183 kilometers on the feeder road network, and 9,384 kilometers on the urban road network. Mr. Speaker, in spite of the major investments made in the road sector, we continue to have some major deficits. The past few years has recorded a significant increase in the award of contracts, leading to a large portfolio of projects that are in excess of what our budget can accommodate. This has led to delayed payments and the resultant penalty payments, accumulation of arrears, and unacceptable poor quality but costly road construction. There are also the issues of limited contractor capacities leading to substandard work, encroachment of right-of-way, and lack of maintenance and care. In 2017, government will undertake a review of existing projects to bring them to more sustainable levels and within available funding. Monitoring will be strengthened and efficiency measures followed. New projects will only be accommodated after this review and within the allowable fiscal space. In the meantime, maintenance work will be continued. This will include 11,900 kilometers of routine maintenance activities, 22,950 kilometers on trunk and feeder roads, and 10,200 kilometers of urban road network. The ministry will also undertake minor rehabilitation works on 60 kilometers of trunk roads, 150 kilometers of feeder roads, and 100 kilometers of urban roads. In 2017, 195 kilometers of trunk roads and 25 kilometers of urban roads will be constructed. Some of the key roads programmed for construction include construction of bridge on the Volta River at Volivo, in Sawam, Apeja Road, Kwafukrum, Tamaleyendi Road, Bolgatanga, Boku, Polmakom, in Kwanta, Otida Mango Road, Otida Mango Napanduri Road, Brekum, Sekwa Road, Enchi to Dadieso, Kasua Interchange and Ancillary Road, dualization of home and roads, construction of Go Bypass, construction of Obechabi Lamte Interchange, construction of Pokwasi Interchange, Kumasi Roads and Drainage Extension Projects. Kumasi Roads and Drainage Extension Projects. Education. The mandate of the ministry is to provide equitable access and quality education to all Ghanaians, to make them functional citizens in order to contribute to the growth and development of the country. Over the medium term, government aims to shift the structure and content of Ghana's education system away from merely passing examinations to building character, nurturing values, and raising literate, confident, and engaged citizens who can think critically. To overcome this challenge, government will also redefine basic education to include secondary education, covering technical, vocational, and agricultural education. As part of this initiative, basic education certificate examinations will be used as a tool for placement of students into second cycle schools and not for certification. To improve the quality and relevance of education and further make the products of our school systems competitive, government will review the basic level curriculum to focus on the 4 R's of reading, writing, arithmetic, and recreation, to include life skills and creative skills. Government intends to ensure that all our children have these basic skills when they exit the primary school system. The health sector continues to grapple Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased that my honorable colleagues across the aisle have accepted free SHS. Thank you for the reminder. Health. The health sector continues to grapple with the challenge of bringing the equity gap in access to health care between urban and rural, as well as the rich and the poor. Production and distribution of health personnel, high under 5 and maternal mortality rates, and neglect of the mental health subsector, resulting in huge unmet need for mental health services. In 2017, there will be improved coverage of antenatal care services, and delivery by skilled attendants is expected to increase from the 2016 targets of 78% and 53% to 80%, 55% respectively. The target for fully immunized children will be maintained at above 90% in 2017. Gender and social protection. Gender and social protection, Mr. Speaker. Following the conclusion of the Millennium Development Goals in 2015, Ghana joined the world in developing the Sustainable Development Goals, which was endorsed by the United Nations at its 70th session in September 2015. The SDG is adopted globally to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all. In order to fight extreme poverty and vulnerabilities and ensure that no group is disadvantaged and left behind in the development process, government is committed to improve on social protection policy implementation and systems. The Ministry of Gender, Children, and Social Protection will facilitate the passage of the Affirmative Action Bill and the Domestic Workers Bill, will refocus the LEAP program and adopt effective means of targeting and enrolling beneficiary households. The school feeding program will also be reviewed to make it more transparent and effective and linked to the agriculture sector initiatives. Youth and sports development. Mr. Speaker, the youth will drive the discovery of new technologies, innovation, and growth in the future. Our focus over the medium term is to create an enabling environment to build the capacity of our youth to take on more active roles in our country's future and its development. A number of initiatives we are rolling out are targeted at the youth. In the area of sports development, feasibility studies will be completed to facilitate the expansion of the infrastructure stock and transform the National Sport College into a center of excellence through public-private partnership arrangements. Additional efforts will be made to support other disciplines, starting from our schools. Mr. Speaker, policy initiatives. Mr. Speaker, despite the major macroeconomic and structural challenges we face as a nation, we believe that with the appropriate policy interventions, we will set the stage for job creation opportunities, ease hardships, and secure a bright future for all of our families, businesses, and industries. The following policy initiatives are therefore designed to help improve the business environment, instill fiscal discipline, and promote investment in critical infrastructure, especially in rural and deprived communities. Improving the business environment, tax incentives. Mr. Speaker, a number of tax measures have been introduced in recent years in an attempt to deal with revenue shortfalls. Some have proven to be nuisance taxes. They have low revenue yielding potential and at the same time impose significant burden on the private sector and on the average Ghanaian citizen. As part of our commitment to re-energize the private sector, government has decided, as pledged, to review these taxes to provide relief for businesses.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, the following specific measures shall be implemented in the short to medium term. With this budget, abolish the 1% special import levy. Abolish the 17.5% VAT on financial services. Abolish the 17.5% VAT on selected imported medicines that are not produced locally. Initiate steps to remove import duties on raw materials and machinery. Initiate steps.
Order.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable members, order. The time for
Mr.
debate
Speaker.
will be ample. It will soon come.
we will initiate steps
Order for now.
to remove import duties on raw materials and machinery for production within the context of the ECOWAS Common External Tariff Protocol. We will abolish the 70.5% of domestic airline tickets. We will abolish the 5% VAT on real estate sales. We will abolish Mr. Speaker, we will abolish excise duty on petroleum. Mr. Speaker, we will reduce the special petroleum tax rate. We will reduce the special petroleum tax rate from 70.5% to 15%. Mr. Speaker,
Honorable members, order.
Mr. Speaker, to all of our friends in Abosokai, we would abolish duty on the importation of spare parts. Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, shall we continue? Order.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr.
Honorable
Speaker.
members, order.
Mr. Speaker, I acknowledge that these seemed impossible a few moments ago, but we shall abolish duties on importation of spare parts. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, order. Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. President Nana Addo Dankwa's measures to eliminate nuisance taxes is not over. Mr. Speaker, we shall abolish levies imposed on Kaya by local authorities. Mr. Speaker.
Order. Shall we progress? Shall we continue, honorable members?
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker. We will further
conclude the presentation and then we shall have our say. Honorable Minister, you may continue, please.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we will further exempt from taxation the gains from realization of securities listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Mr. Speaker, we would replace the 17.5% VAT rate with a flat rate of 3% for traders. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we would, Mr. Speaker, we would also implement tax credits and other incentives for businesses that hire young graduates. But Mr. Speaker, we are not done. We will reduce the National Electrification Scheme levy from 5% to 3%, and we will reduce the Public Lighting levy from 5% to 2%. Mr. Speaker, review of import duty and tax exemptions. Mr. Speaker, while government's focus is on reducing taxes to enhance production, we are also determined to tackle the systemic abuse in the exemptions regime. There shall be a comprehensive review of the regime on import duty exemptions and tax reliefs with a view to eliminating abuses and improving efficiency in the application of these incentives. To this end, the review will cover, among others, the following exemptions and tax reliefs as a matter of urgency: import duties, taxes, and levies payable by MDAs and other government departments; import duties on all forms of taxes and levies payable by both domestic and foreign companies, suppliers, and contractors executing projects and contracts in the country; import duty on all forms of taxes and levies payable by employees, directors, and senior officials of both domestic and foreign companies, suppliers, and contractors executing projects in the country; import duties on all forms of taxes and levies payable by both domestic and foreign companies and investors doing business in the country; and import duties on all forms of taxes and levies payable by non-governmental and charity organizations. Mr. Speaker, as a transition arrangement henceforth, applications for these import duty exemptions and tax reliefs shall be required to, except in exceptional circumstances to be determined by the Minister of Finance, pay fully all applicable import duties and taxes and apply with justification for refunds. And apply and apply
Order.
and apply with
Order.
justification for refund. Local content. Government believes in empowering the local private sector and will pass legislation to require that over time, at least 70% of all government projects and procurements are executed by local corporations and enterprises with set-asides for entities owned by women, persons with disability, and those established under the Youth Enterprise Fund, among other initiatives. Government will introduce and enforce a local content policy for government projects and procurement that will focus on job creation and local value addition with emphasis on skills improvement. To ensure the success of this policy, government will require, among other things, a job impact analysis of all qualifying projects that must demonstrate clearly positive job creation with skills improvements and other local addition, value addition that must pass strict criteria established by the government. LI 2204, which was passed in 2013 to maximize value addition and job creation through local value addition, will be expanded and legislated as local country content for the country. Job impact analysis. In the push towards job creation and skills development, government will introduce a mandatory job impact assessment for all public sector projects or initiatives. Job impact assessment will also be required of private sector entities that assess government projects or contracts. In other words, all public sector projects, whether it is executed by the public sector or the private sector contractors, must undergo a job impact assessment to evaluate the potential job creation impact. This will enable government to analyze how various jobs are being created so as to better structure incentives and stimuli for higher skills and opportunities for Ghanaians. Banking sector initiatives. Mr. Speaker, banks play an important role in our economy. Despite past interventions, the banking sector still faces major challenges. We are committed to working with the financial sector to resolve these challenges. A strong private sector credit growth is needed to support our medium-term GDP growth to increase productivity and create jobs. We will harmonize and streamline some of the existing policies to make the sector more efficient. Policy interventions will focus on improving liquidity for banks through the payment of SOE-related debt due banks over the short to medium term in line with our debt sustainability framework. Specific measures to be implemented in 2017 and the medium term include streamline the Energy Sector Levy Act to accommodate all the existing legacy debts for the banking and the private sector, which include energy sector debt of distribution companies and other energy sector-related debts. Ensure that revenue streams from ESLA are properly used to ensure certainty of cash flow for the payment of all corresponding debts. Work with commercial banks to ensure that they are able to issue bonds on the back of the streamlined ESLA revenue for immediate liquidity. In addition, the Bank of Ghana, in collaboration with government, will undertake the following structural reforms to the banking sector. Increase the banking industry's minimum capital requirement and strengthen the licensing and regulatory framework. Introduce risk capital requirements in addition to minimum capital requirements for banks. Strengthen corporate governance by enforcing the term limits for board chairmen and managing directors of commercial banks in accordance with the Banking Act. Enhance enforcement of single obligor limit for commercial banks. And support mobile money and mobile banking businesses to enhance and expand financial services. We will also support Ghanaian-owned banks with credit as they support the SME sector. We believe that all of these measures will help minimize systemic risks in the banking industry. Capital Market Development Initiative. Mr. Speaker, the growth of Ghana's capital market is impeded by the lack of depth and liquidity. Addressing these challenges require the implementation of decisive measures in the short to medium term to deepen the capital markets, increase liquidity and trading activities, and encourage more companies to be listed. The specific measures to be implemented to improve capital market performance in 2016 and the medium term include the following. Exempt from taxation the gains from realization of securities listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Exempt the financial services industry from the Financial Services Act tax, as I've mentioned. Encourage a capital market content policy that enjoins companies operating in the energy and oil and gas financial services, telecom, mining sectors to list a minimum percentage of their shares on the Ghana Stock Exchange within 5 years of commencement of operations, and divest government's holding in some SOEs with a view to ensuring efficiency. This will include the sale of government shares in some SOEs companies via listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange. We will work with the Securities and Exchange Commission to develop the regulations governing asset-backed instruments, including real estate investment trusts and mortgage-backed securities, and enable the pensions industry to support the development of these asset classes and other alternative investment schemes. Mr. Speaker, the National Pensions Regulatory Authority will be moved back to be under the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations. This is because, just like the SEC and SNIT, the MPRA is a financial services regulator, but of the pensions industry that also deals with a lot of labor issues. Pensions are about finance, financial contributions, financial investments, and benefit payouts. All the above financial decisions affecting employees, hence the decision to have joint oversight of the two ministries. MPRA will in addition be completely weaned off this year, 2017. Building an entrepreneurial nation. Mr. Speaker, this government seeks to build an entrepreneurial nation. The National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Plan is a flagship initiative which will be the primary vehicle for providing an integrated support for early stage startup businesses and small businesses, focusing on the provision of business development services, business incubators, and funding for youth-owned businesses. The NEIP will enable qualified new businesses to emerge and give them the space to grow, position them to attract financing, and provide business development support services. The program will assist these businesses to secure markets during the critical formative years and tap into a wide supply chain and network during their growth periods. National Industrial Revitalization Program, a stimulus package for industry. Growth in the industrial and manufacturing sector has significantly declined over time, contributing to an unprecedented level of unemployment. This situation could be attributed to a variety of factors, including, but not limited to, the high cost of capital, limited access to medium to long-term financing, high cost of electricity and unreliable power supply, limited access to land for industrial activity, as well as weak logistics and infrastructure support for industrial development. It is against this background that the National Industrial Revitalization Program, with a stimulus package for industry, will be established to provide technical and financial support to existing companies that are currently distressed or are facing operational challenges, but are deemed to be viable to benefit from the stimulus package, which will put them in operation in the shortest possible time. Industrializing Ghana from the ground up. One district, one factory. One district, one factory implementation, of which will commence this year, will be closely intertwined with our National Industrialization Revitalization Program. It's designed as a comprehensive program for rural industrialization, driven by the private sector and involving the setting up of at least one medium to large-scale factory in each of the administrative districts of our country. It is aimed at creating massive youth employment, especially in rural and peri-urban communities, add value to the natural resources of each district, ensure even and spatial spread of industries to stimulate economic growth in all parts of the country, enhance the production of local substitutes for imported goods, and promote exports and increase foreign exchange earnings. It has the potential, Mr. Speaker, of transforming the industrial landscape of Ghana and will contribute significantly to the socio-economic development agenda of the country. We estimate that over 350,000 direct and indirect jobs will be created from all parts of the country as a result of the implementation of this program. National Identification Program. Mr. Speaker, The benefits of having a modern, reliable, and unique national identification system are enormous and imperative for the development of our nation. A robust identification system and the issuance and use of integrated multi-purpose national identification card would enable us to advance economic, civic, and social activities in Ghana and to target particular developmental programs. It is against this background that the National Identification Authority was established in 2007 to oversee the registration of all residents in Ghana. However, a decade later, the NIA has made limited progress. In consonance with government's commitment to re-energize NIA to fulfill its statutory mandate, the new leadership of the NIA will be supported and resourced to be more effective. Government has commenced stakeholder consultations to revive and roll out the National Identification Scheme in 2017. All registered persons will be provided with a unique identification number and an ID card. Subsequently, a national ID card shall be required for the provision and efficient delivery of public and private services, including financial services, mobile banking, m-commerce, social safety nets, health insurance, and revenue collection, among others. National Digital Addressing System. Mr. Speaker, the last time the whole country was mapped was in 1974. The lack of modern property addressing system in Ghana is a serious impediment to our developmental agenda. As part of our plans to enhance economic growth and development, government has commenced stakeholder consultations to develop and implement a national digital property addressing system for the country in 2017. The aim of the national property addressing system is to have digital addresses for parcels of land and properties of the entire country. Every land or property will be assigned a unique identifier. This is aimed at facilitating improved ownership data and unique identification of properties. A proper addressing of properties will ensure efficient delivery of services for economic activity and collection of taxes. E-Services Portal. In order to improve efficiency of service delivery by government institutions in regard to acquisition of licenses and payment for services, government established the E-Services Portal in 2012. This platform has helped in the delivery of government services, licenses and permits, etc. Government will expand coverage to all parts of the country and improve efficiency of service delivery through private sector participation in the E-Services Portal. This is expected to help reduce corruption, promote compliance, and improve the tracking of government resources. Expenditure management and control. Mr. Speaker, our country continues to grapple with weak expenditure management and budgetary controls, leading to excessive expenditure overruns and payment arrears, resulting in persistent fiscal deficit. Prudent expenditure management and commitment controls are therefore very crucial in order to achieve the goals and objectives of this budget. The enforcement of PFMA. Mr. Speaker, the Public Financial Management Act 921, passed by Parliament and enacted in law in August 2016, has the sole objective to strengthen the public financial management system in the country. The Act regulates the financial management of the public sector within a sound macroeconomic and fiscal framework, defines the responsibilities of persons entrusted with the management and control of public funds, assets, liabilities, and resources in a manner consistent with the level of public debt, provides for the accounting and audit of public funds, and provides for more robust sanctions and penalties. The effectiveness of the law depends to a large extent on strong enforcement and compliance with a sanctions regime. Government will ensure that the robust sanctions regime provided for in the law is complied with by all public institutions. The required institutional arrangements, including functional independent audit committees, will be addressed to promote and enhance the effectiveness of the law. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the assignment of responsibilities and enforcement of sanctions, two provisions are crucial for the effective implementation of the law. First is the commitment controls provisions to curb the buildup of expenditure arrears. Second is a provision that prohibits MDAs from entering into any agreements with financial commitments that bind government for more than one financial year, or that results in contingent liability, unless approved by the Minister of Finance and authorized by Parliament. These we must strictly adhere to if we are to ensure sound public financial management. To fully operationalize the law to enhance budget credibility, government will ensure the introduction of the necessary regulation to support the implementation of the law in collaboration with PFM stakeholders for effective implementation of the Act. Government, through the Ministry of Finance, will strengthen oversight of SOEs and public corporations, as well as local government, to help mitigate fiscal risks emanating from contingent liabilities. Mr. Speaker, to facilitate adherence to the provisions of the law, the Ministry will continue with the sensitization program for public institutions at the national and subnational levels, as well as for key stakeholders, including CSOs, media, professional bodies, and the public at large. Establishment of the Fiscal Council. Ghana, Mr. Speaker, has been faced with significant long-term fiscal slippages and an escalating public debt stock leading to high risk of debt distress. This is principally due to the fact that our fiscal policy implementation lacks a transparent institutional arrangement for providing quality fiscal information to the public, a mechanism for ensuring accountability in implementing optimal fiscal policies to guarantee the stability of the system, and an institution to ensure the credibility of fiscal projections provided by the government. To address this, government will initiate the process toward the establishment of a fiscal council that will adopt and implement rules to anchor fiscal policy implementation. The Fiscal Council will contribute to the accountability of government responsible for setting up medium-term fiscal policy anchors to guide fiscal policy as well as monitor compliance. The principal objective for the formation of the Fiscal Council are to ensure the credibility of our fiscal projections, to set up medium-term fiscal policy anchors to guide fiscal policy, and monitor compliance of fiscal policy rules. Legal backing will be given to the Fiscal Council through an amendment of the PFM Act 2016, Act 921, to inter alia capture all the elements of a fiscal responsibility law. Realignment of statutory funds. Mr. Speaker, as the President noted in the State of the Nation address on the 21st of February 2016, and I quote, "The reality of Ghana's public finances today are stark. Today, as a result of policy choices, we find ourselves in a situation where Ghana's total revenue is consumed by three main budgetary lines: wages and salaries, interest payments and amortization, and statutory payments. These three items alone account for 99.6% of government revenue. This means that anything else that government has to do outside of these lines will have to be financed by borrowing or aid. The persistent resort to borrowing for any additional expenditures to meet the aspirations of our people is not sustainable. We cannot continue this way with our public finances." End of quote. Indeed, this problem of lack of fiscal space in the current budget architecture and the problems associated with earmarking was rightly recognized by the NDC government in the 2010, 2011, 2015, and 2016 budget statements. In these budget statements, the then Ministers for Finance noted the following, I quote, "Statutory funds introduce extreme inflexibility in the management of the budget, giving no room for policy maneuver. Given the important social interventions that need to be scaled up and or implemented, some key government programs will have to be offloaded from the core budget to the statutory funds in order to create space for the utilization of discretionary expenditure in other priority areas." That's a 2010 budget statement. I quote, this is the 2011 budget statement. "Over 75% of the total wage bill and associated increases resulting from the single spine salary structure goes to employees in only three MBAs, namely the education, health, and local government, which ironically are the very sectors with the statutory funds that introduce rigidities in the budget structure and leaves no revenue space for the sustainable implementation of a single spine salary structure. End of quote. In the 2015 budget, the minister stated, and I quote, "Mr. Speaker, the national budget is increasingly becoming inflexible to manage as well as to accommodate shocks and changes in government priorities. These are mainly due to the earmarking of a huge component of the budgetary resources as statutory transfers in addition to existing statutory liabilities, such as wages and salaries, amortization, and interest payments. Mr. Speaker, in the medium term, government will realign expenditures under the statutory funds. Mr. Speaker, in the medium term, government will realign expenditures under the statutory funds, hitherto being created for under the consolidated fund. Starting with the 2015 budget and as a transitional arrangement, government will enhance the administrative process for aligning statutory funds expenditure to national policies and priorities." That's the 2015 budget. And in the 2016 budget, the minister says, and I quote, "To address the increasing rigidities in the budget that limits the room for policy maneuver, Mr. Speaker,
Order.
Mr. Speaker,
Order.
Mr. Speaker, quoting from the 2016 budget statement, and I quote, "To address the increasing rigidities in the budget that limits the room for policy maneuver, government announced a policy of aligning the statutory and internally generated funds to national fiscal goals in the 2014 budget. Consequently, in 2016, statutory fund expenditure totaling 564.6 million will be realigned to the central government budget." End of quote. In 2016, Mr. Speaker, transfers to the earmarked funds constituted 33.5% of national revenue, up from 28.2% in 2015. These rigidities mean the government's ability to shift public spending from one expenditure line item to another is hindered, even where current exigencies require government to do so. Consequently, it has become difficult to use public spending as an instrument to respond to changing public needs in all of our constituencies. Further, these increasing statutory rigidities have limited our flexibility and impeded our ability to meet our commitments, especially capital expenditure. As such, we continue to miss our obligatory disbursement to the statutory funds due to wishes to fulfill other commitments. Mr. Speaker, in sum, we have been unable as a nation to comply with our statutory and budget requirements in respect of earmarked funds because they impose uncertainties in our public expenditure and development strategies as recognized by the NDC. Notwithstanding the recognition of the underlying problem with the lack of flexibility and space in the budget as a result of the earmarking of funds, we have not tackled the problem over the years. After many years of talking about it, this budget is finally going to tackle this problem. Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker. Starting this year, government will propose a cap of 25% of tax revenue to all earmarked funds for the approval of this august House. The capping of transfers to earmarked funds to 25% of tax revenues in any particular year will allow a realignment of budget revenues to government priorities and, in fact, make possible increased expenditure on government priorities such as education, health, agriculture, and infrastructure. However, we will make adjustments for constitutionally mandated earmark funds to make them whole. Treasury and risk management. Mr. Speaker, efficient budget implementation requires a proper alignment of cash inflows and outflows. This will improve the predictability of budget implementation and cash allocation. In line with this, government will strengthen its treasury management functions by creating a treasury management unit in the Ministry of Finance to handle all treasury management and related functions. The current PFM law will be enforced with regards to utilization of the treasury single account. To this end, the bank accounts of all government institutions will be transferred to the central bank for ease of management and monitoring. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, government will eliminate all payments in cash at service delivery points in public service institutions, including MDAs and MMDAs, in order to improve efficiency in service delivery and revenue collection to support the TSA. Improving payroll management. Mr. Speaker, the size of the public sector compensation bill, which accounts for a significant proportion of domestic revenue, is a major concern for government. It is one of the big three budget line items that continue to narrow government's choices in pursuing higher economic growth and development programs. The SNIT database will be used as a filter for the payment of public sector workers. Starting in April, all workers who have not been biometrically registered with SNIT will be taken off government payroll. Mr. Speaker, recruitment and promotion of related areas. Mr. Speaker, in spite of the Public Services Commission policy on recruitment and promotion, we continue to see delays in the processing of recruitment and in promotions. These delays create frustrations for new recruits and serve as demotivation for serving officers due for promotion. Further, these delays lead to unexpected accumulation of arrears that hurt the integrity of our fiscal planning. Mr. Speaker, in order to control the wage bill and avoid compensation arrears that have not been provided for in our budgets, government will from 2017 strictly enforce the policy guidelines on the effective dates of promotions and recruitment within the public service. Substantive effective dates of recruitment and promotion shall not be backdated without the explicit permission of the Minister of Finance in writing. Enforcement of the Public Procurement Act. Mr. Speaker, as part of our expenditure management framework, government will strictly enforce the provision of the Public Procurement Act, 2003 Act 921, as amended by the Public Procurement Act 2016 Act 914, especially with regard to sole source, which has proven to pose significant risks to fiscal policy management. To ensure that public procurement are done within budgetary constraints, we intend to strengthen the procurement process by introducing another level of approval for MDAs and NMDAs. To this end, Mr. Speaker, sole source procurements by MDAs and MMDAs beyond the threshold of 50 million Ghana cedis will be subject to explicit approval by Cabinet before submission to the Public Procurement Authority for consideration and approval. Improving debt management.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, as a sign of government's commitment to ensuring public debt sustainability within the framework of the PFMA, the debt management strategy in 2017 envisages the introduction of new instruments to further lengthen the maturity profile of public debt, reduce costs and risk factors associated with the debt portfolio through effective liability management, and support the development of the public sector. Liability management. Mr. Speaker, to improve the structure of public debt, government will continue to implement sound liability management initiatives aimed at reducing interest costs and mitigating interest rates risks associated with the current debt portfolio. This will involve the implementation of a wide variety of operations, including the buyback of existing debt using sinking fund account, interest rate hedging, and the use of structured financial instruments as market conditions permit. Implementation of credit risk assessment. Mr. Speaker, the current financial state and governance structures of the SOEs, particularly in the energy sector, is worrying. This continues to pose challenges for fiscal policy outcomes. In this regard, government will implement the credit risk assessment framework to guide SOE borrowing. Necessary security structures and instruments are put in place by the SOE to ensure they honor their debt obligations. In addition, government intends to establish a single entity with oversight responsibility of the SOEs. This forms part of broader SOE reforms aimed at consolidating the state's ownership role, improve performance, and ensure effective and efficient service delivery by SOEs. Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program. Mr. Speaker, government intends to pursue an inclusive development strategy aimed at radically improving the state of basic infrastructure at the constituency level, especially in rural and deprived communities. The Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program, IPEP, will be our main vehicle for tackling these challenges. The IPEP is designed to direct our capital expenditure towards local, constituency-level, specific infrastructure and economic development priorities, with particular emphasis on rural and deprived communities. Mr. Speaker, under IPEP, every one of our 275 constituencies will be, as I stated, allocated the equivalent of $1 million annually for
Order.
This will be the equivalent of 4.39. This, Mr. Speaker, this will be the equivalent of 4.39 million Ghana cedis annually. It is expected that the project selected under standardized guidelines will fall in the following categories: 1 district, 1 factory, 1 village, 1 dam, small business development, agriculture inputs, including equipment, water for all projects, and sanitation projects. Mr. Speaker, establishment of development authorities. Mr. Speaker, in order to ensure that IPEP and other local initiatives are implemented in a well-coordinated manner, government will set up 3 development authorities, namely Northern Development Authority, Middle Belt Development Authority, and Coastal Development Authority. The development authorities will be the main economic development implementing agencies in the areas they cover. Mr. Speaker, government will restructure and transform the Savannah Accelerated Development Authority into a more focused Northern Development Authority dealing with the 57 constituencies as originally envisaged. We will make the NDA a flagship program which will serve as a vehicle for delivering our economic transformation agenda in the 3 northern regions. Mr. Speaker, the Middle Belt Development Authority will serve as the main development agency for the Middle Belt of the country. The Coastal Development Authority will serve as the principal development agency for the coastal regions of the country. The Zongo Development Fund, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as part of our efforts to develop the Zongo communities, government will set up a Zongo Development Fund, ZDF, with seed money of 219.5 million Ghana cedis. The fund will support the provision of critical infrastructure in education and training, health and sanitation, local businesses and centers of culture, as well as improve security in our Zongo communities. The ZDF is expected to leverage its seed fund to attract additional funding from development partners, private sector institutions, civil society organizations, and other non-governmental organizations. Mr. Speaker, free public senior high school. Mr. Speaker, as part of our commitment to improve access to education at all levels, government will implement the comprehensive free public senior high school program, starting with the 2017-2018 academic year. Mr. Speaker, adequate provision have been made for the funding of this monumental social intervention program, which is set to begin in September 2017 from the ABFA and other domestic revenue sources. And other initiatives will be implemented in 2017 as follows. Establishment of an airport-free zone. Mr. Speaker, airports all over the world are becoming increasingly multimodal, multifunctional enterprises, creating considerable opportunities for commercial developments in areas they are located. Available evidence suggests that airports tend to attract investment and therefore generate jobs. Many countries are considering airport cities or aerotropolis, airport-centered urban economic regions, as a vital means of expanding opportunities, creating jobs, and promoting tourism. Mr. Speaker, government has identified the establishment of sector-targeted free zones as a major driver for capital inflows and jobs for Ghanaians starting this year, with the preparatory work for attracting private investment into an airport-free zone. The AFZ will be purely a private sector investment, with government only facilitating the process. Government will explore several options for potential investors. It is expected that the preparatory work for the AFZ will be completed by the end of this fiscal year. Financial Stability Council. Mr. Speaker, exposure to debt from bulk distribution companies, state-owned energy entities, as well as non-performing private sector loans, continues to exert enormous pressures on the banking sector, posing a systemic risk to the entire economy. A significant number of banks have capital adequacy ratios below the required 10%, even after restructuring of the VRA and TOR debts. To address this over the long term, the government will establish a Financial Stability Council that will be mandated, among others, to continuously assess the vulnerabilities affecting the stability of the financial system and provide oversight over the steps taken to avert these risks. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we are committed to achieving a least cost power generation infrastructure through accelerated private sector participation. This will partly involve the restructuring of the power sector by bringing all hydro generation exclusively under the Volta River Authority, VRA, and creating a separate thermal market. A new entity will hold the thermal assets which are currently held by VRA and make available a significant portion of this entity for private sector investment in pursuit of its private sector participation. Mr. Speaker, Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Mr. Speaker, in 2007, the then NPP government announced its intention to set up what was the Ghana Investment Corporation as its principal sovereign wealth fund vehicle. In pursuing this, in April of 2008, the late Kwadwo Redu presented a memo to Cabinet for approval to commence the process of forming the GIC, which was approved. A draft bill was prepared but could not be passed before we exited government. Mr. Speaker, government intends to review the GIF law to make it consistent with the original objectives of the Ghana Investment Corporation. This has become imperative as we seek to take a more aggressive posture in leveraging the asset size of our balance sheet to create wealth to support the development of the country. Mr. Speaker, the GIC will manage the National Asset Protection Project, a program designed to conduct a fiscal and financial audit to locate, identify, and value uncompleted government assets. International Financial Services Center. Mr. Speaker, the Banking Act 2007, Act 738, was passed to make way for the establishment of the International Financial Services Center, IFSC. The purpose is to attract foreign direct investment income from license fees payable in foreign currencies, create employment, enhance local skills and knowledge, strengthen the financial sector through expansion in the use of investment banking instruments, and to increase the general competitiveness of the financial sector. Mr. Speaker, government will reactivate the process started by the Ministry of Finance at the Bank of Ghana as far back as 2007 to establish an International Financial Services Center in Ghana. Mr. Speaker, the Ghana Compact 2 program has officially come into force. Millennium Challenge Corporation. Both parties to the compact, the government of Ghana and the United States of America, are committed to complying with the obligation. As our president said, the implementation of Ghana's commitments has faced some challenges due to disagreements between stakeholders, particularly between Labour, ECG, and the Millennium Development Authority. We need further dialogue on the key issues that have been generated. We are aware that these discussions should be concluded urgently in order to arrive at the decisions that will allow for its implementation. Mr. Speaker, government will reactivate the dialogue on the key issues that have generated these disagreements to ensure that all concerns are adequately addressed and that the resolution will ensure the centrality of Ghanaian leadership in this transaction. Education funds. Mr. Speaker, we will initiate discussions with all stakeholders interested in the performance and excellence of their senior high schools in their communities. Parents, school alumni, religious organizations, the diaspora, and they'll be encouraged to establish a funding mechanism to support high schools of their choice. This will reinforce community involvement in governance and improve the quality of education in our senior high schools. It is time we all participated in ensuring that Ghana education regains its status of excellence. Integrated aluminium industry. Mr. Speaker, Ghana has since 1962 been contemplating the establishment of an integrated aluminium industry using its natural resources in bauxites, hydro, gas, and its existing smelter. The closest that the country got to realizing it was in 2008 when under President J.A. Kufuor. Thankfully, President Akufo-Addo has made the rapid and sustainable establishment of an integrated aluminium industry a top economic priority. This is in line with his vision for industrialization and transformation of the Ghanaian economy, with a deliberate focus on value addition to the country's vast mineral wealth to significantly expand the capacity of the economy to create jobs and wealth for the people. A lot of feasibility studies have been done in this area. The 2017 budget seeks to revive this critical game changer and has accordingly made provision to see the implementation of an integrated aluminium industry. The development of the industry will require 6 main components. First, the development of the bauxite mines which are located in Awaso, Nyinahini, and Chebi. Second, the establishment of refinery at one of the bauxite sites because of its Chebi, because of its closest proximity to Tema, where the Valco smelter is located. The location, because the bauxite is located there and it has close proximity to Tema, where the Valco smelter is located. The allocation of a dedicated, reliable, and affordable source of power supply for the smelter, the development of a railway infrastructure between the mines and Tema, the conversion of the alumina to aluminium at the current Valco plant, the establishment of an industrial park dedicated to manufacturing aluminium-related products to complete the value chain of what is potentially a multi-billion local industry. The President intends to introduce a bill to this House this year to oversee the urgent development of this critical industry. Fighting corruption. Mr. Speaker, as we have said severally, corruption holds back economic growth, increases the cost of doing business, reduces revenue to the states, leads to capital flight, and inflates the cost of running a government. It also results in a loss of legitimacy. It also results in a loss of legitimacy and respect for legally constituted authority. Mr. Speaker, permit me to reassure the other side of the aisle that permit me to assure that the Akufo-Addo government is fully committed to respecting the integrity of contracts, or may I say, contracts with integrity. We intend to continue with public projects that we inherited. However, our commitment to protecting the public purse is paramount and will not be compromised. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, government will continue the implementation of the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. Additionally, government will pursue a combination of institutional and legislative reform as part of our anti-corruption policy, including establishing the Office of the Special Prosecutor, strictly applying the provisions in the PFM and the PPA Acts, as well as amend, in particular, Sections 3, 151, and 239 to 257 of the Criminal Offences Act 1960, Act 29, which will make corruption a felony instead of a misdemeanor. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to passing the Right to Information Bill as part of our tools in fighting corruption. We will not pay lip service to fighting corruption. Mr. Speaker, the centerpiece of this budget is to create an environment that will stimulate the private sector to create jobs, especially for the youth. It seeks to create an enabling environment to build the capacity of our youth to take on more active roles in the country's future and its development. This has been reflected in the key policy initiatives announced in the budget, such as tax policy measures, financial sector initiative, entrepreneurship development, one district, one factory, one village, one dam, small business development, stimulus package for industries, planting for food and jobs, and sanitation. Mr. Speaker, Ghana turns 60 in a few days, and there has been some debate whether it is worth celebrating this milestone given the somber state of affairs. I believe we must. This anniversary provides us not only the opportunity to reflect, but also the challenge to chart a new and enduring course. Ghana is seen as a bastion of democracy and stability in Africa. As a country, we have deepened our democracy. As a country, We have deepened our democracy.
Order.
We have had 3 peaceful and successful transfers of power in the 4th Republic. Our love for education and national character of friendliness and peace-loving set us apart. Our economic challenges have, however, been the bane of our development aspirations. The policy actions spelled out in President Akufo-Addo's budget seek to give people greater socio-economic meaning to the gains of democracy. Mr. Speaker, we are ready to fix the economy and change the narrative to put the economy. Mr. Speaker, we are ready to fix the economy and change the narrative to put the economy on the right path of phenomenal growth. We believe that this budget sows the seeds for growth, jobs, and the economic transformation agenda outlined in the vision of the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
Order.
the President, I wish to emphasize, believes in value for money because he knows that we can achieve far more for Ghana, even with what we have, if we apply discipline, integrity, care for the public purse. My job as a Speaker, as Finance Minister, is to help the country win this important battle to protect and do far more for the public purse of the little we have. And I pledge to do my best for the nation. Ours, Mr. Speaker, government is a government of destiny, which will unite our people, and together, including all the honorable members in this chamber, we will create a climate of social solidarity, a society where the preferential option for the poor is at the core of a private sector-led growth to transform our society and achieve social justice,
Order.
inclusive growth, and restore human dignity and prosperity for all citizens. Poverty, honorable members, is not natural. Our challenge as we sit in these hallowed halls is to liberate ourselves from a rigid and unjust economic and political social system which we have helped to impose on our nation. The democratic dividends of prosperity and equity are thus currently eluding us, and we must restore them. Mr. Speaker, this government will take deliberate and strategic steps to fundamentally change the structure of this economy bequeathed to us 60 years ago, and we are committed to implementing the measures I have outlined. We will restore and sustain macro stability. We will provide the environment for private sector to grow and to thrive. We will improve public services and tackle corruption. We will support small businesses in rural and deprived areas. We will ensure that every Ghanaian has equal opportunity and right to lead a productive and dignified life, being able to fully develop their God-given capabilities. Our rural communities, Mr. Speaker, will begin to see a more purposeful and sustained effort at transforming their lives through the introduction of various district-level industrial and agricultural initiatives, as well as improved education, health facilities, and services. Mr. Speaker, I see our nation with this overwhelming election mandate as all having decided to withdraw in unison, like our Lord Jesus, to a remote place. Mr. Speaker, only to discover when we got there that we have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish to feed our 25 million people. But hearing, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Honorable Honorable members,
Mr. Speaker.
order.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members,
Only to discover.
Order. We
Only
hear
to
the
discover.
budget in its totality, facts, figures, and also philosophy behind the budget. Listen to them. And then honorable members will have their day.
Only to discover, Mr. Speaker, that we have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes to feed our 25 million plus fellow citizens. But herein lies the genius of the Ghanaian. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. So as you can see, Mr. Speaker, with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, President Akufo-Addo's budget has tackled the 5 structural pillars of revenue, expenditure,
Order. Order.
So, Mr. Speaker, President Akufo-Addo's budget, 5 loaves and 2 fishes, has tackled the 5
Order,
structural
order.
pillars of revenue, expenditure, earmarked funds, labor, and our debt. Budgetary allocations have been made from tax revenue, ABFA, and the realignment of the statutory funds to fund these priority projects. And we have done this through prioritization of expenditures and planned improvement and efficiencies in government spending. Mr. Speaker, in addition to funding these significant number of programs, we have allocated over 700 million for CAPEX, 7 times more than was allocated last year. We have funded NHIS and given free SHS. We have provided immense tax reliefs, including restoration of teachers and nursing training allowances. We have provided tax reliefs. We have provided tax reliefs for the private sector, including our friends in Aboso Kind and all other socio-economic classes. We have reduced. We have reduced levies on petroleum products.
Order.
We have reduced levies on petroleum products. We have reduced levies on petroleum products. We have
Order. Honorable members, order.
So, Mr. Speaker, even with these limited resources, we have fully funded NHIS. We have given free SHS. We have We have provided tax relief for the private sector and all other socio-economic classes. We have reduced levies on petroleum products. We have reduced electricity levies. We have provided a stimulus for the private sector in industry, services, and agriculture. We have brought down the deficit from 8.7% to 6.5%. But that is not all, Mr. Speaker. For with the parable of the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, we still have. But that is not all, Mr. Speaker. But as per the parable I have shared with you, We still have 12 basketfuls of fish and loaf yet to deliver to sow for the future for growth and jobs. Our aim, Mr. Speaker, is to restore hope and steer the country onto a sustainable and inclusive growth path. A country that is re-energized to redefine and reorient itself to confront the challenges ahead. A country in charge of its own destiny, a country where the private sector is well equipped to invest in the economy and be the catalyst of growth, a country where our youth have access to the requisite education which will expand their horizon and give them opportunity to dream and dream big and express their creativity, talents, and ability. A country where each and every citizen is proud to be Ghanaian and to call this country home. Mr. Speaker, let me take this moment as we come to the end of this great privilege to present President Akufo-Addo's first budget to this august House. To reflect, Mr. Speaker, on one of the finest moments, in our history of our democracy on July 23rd, 1981. Mr. Speaker, as you all know, during the Third Republic, the country was in economic crisis under the government of the PMP. I am proud to say that my father, Dr. John Soforiata, in your house, in opposition with an amendment motion, co-sponsored by Dr. G.K. Agama, successfully got this august House to amend the motion to save the country in crisis. Honorable members, on July 23, 1981, honorable members, we do have a crisis. We do have a challenge. We can handle it, and I'll call on you, honorable minority, Honorable Minority Leader Haruna Idrisu.
Order.
Honorable James Afeji, Deputy Minority Leader. Honorable Mankata Mubarak, Chief Minority Whip. Honorable Ibrahim Ahmed, Deputy Chief Minority Whip.
The budget is bad. The budget.
The Honorable
Order.
The Honorable Second Deputy Speaker Alban Bagbin and the Honorable Ranking Members Atu Forsen and Fifi Quato of the Finance Committee to join us in this great example of the Third Republic to salvage and build our economy together. We believe, with the help of the Almighty God, we can deliver on President Akufo-Addo's well-thought-out programs and policies and build a business-friendly and prosperous economy. Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind you of the State of the Nation address when this President stated that the times in which we deem we live demand that we all be in a hurry to deal with the problems that we face. Mr. Speaker, honorable members across the aisle, given the great precedent set by the Third Republic, honorable members across the aisle, I enjoin you, please join me in this debate going forward to enrich it. Mr. Speaker, we can do it. I personally pledge to work with you, to work with candor, with transparency, and respect, and an undying commitment on my part to protect the public purse. To the people of Ghana, I pledge to serve you and to ask for your prayers. Mr. Speaker, the Lord did not give us a spirit of timidity, and we must confront these problems, but a spirit of power, of love, and of self-discipline. God, indeed, Mr. Speaker, we are at a crucial point in our history, and this is a nation that the Lord has blessed. God, indeed, bless our whole land Ghana, make our nation great and strong. Mr. Speaker,
Order, honorable members.
Mr. Speaker, I beg at this juncture to move the Asempa budget. Thank you.
Honorable members, order. Order. Thank you very much, Honorable Finance Minister, for your delivery. Reference to the order paper